Am I the a-hole for avoiding my parents after discovering they were spreading super inappropriate lies about my husband and I? Last year, my husband, H, and I met my parents, aunt and uncle for Thanksgiving. They had been vacationing together a few days prior. As we were leaving, my aunt, who was visibly upset, pulled me aside. "I need to talk to you, can you call me in a few days?" I asked if she was okay. She said yes. "I just need to ask you something, but not now." When I called to ask what was going on, my aunt said, "I heard something that seems very out of character for you and I want to see if it's true." Evidently, a few days before Thanksgiving, my parents told her an untrue story about how my current husband and I met. To note, I was separated at the time from my now ex-husband when we met. She explained, according to my parents, I met H while online soliciting for a proposed threesome with my ex-husband as a last-ditch effort to salvage my then failing marriage. However, during this tryst, H and I supposedly realized we had a connection which led us to be together while choosing to dissolve my previous marriage. My parents shared more gross details, but I'll spare you. I was shocked as none of this was true. We met at work through mutual friends and our romantic relationship developed slowly over a period of time. I had repeatedly told my parents how we met, and even introduced our mutual friends to my parents at our wedding as the ones who got us together. So, I FaceTimed my parents and asked them why they're lying about us behind our backs. They look me dead in the eyes and say, "Because that's what you told us." Excuse me? When I refuted this, my dad proceeds to get angry at me, saying that I must have amnesia as my mom stormed off, refusing to discuss the issue. The rest of the call is me sitting in silence, while he attempted to gaslight me. I'm dumbfounded. A few days later, I get a call from my cousin. She explains that my dad had told her husband the same story almost 8 years ago, which they had believed until now. My cousin apologized for not saying anything sooner, but the story made them so uncomfortable they didn't know what to do. H and I wrote my parents an email explaining what we had discovered and asked them some simple questions like, "Why did you make this up? Who else have you told?" etc. We've been emailing back and forth for almost a year and gotten nowhere. Their story keeps changing, the blame keeps shifting, and they have continuously tried to diminish the seriousness of this issue, even saying no one thinks any less of you because of it. What? It never happened. Period. The only apology we've gotten is, "We're sorry for upsetting you." You mean you're not sorry for lying about your daughter for 10 years? Most recently, they have almost demanded that we forgive them and move on. Am I the a-hole for telling my friends that my husband isn't well read? Background: my husband, let's call him Will, is in the Navy, and he works on nuclear reactors on submarines. We've been together for 4 years, married for 2. We were at a small house party with a few friends of mine from college and we were discussing books we've all read, when at one point one of my friends, let's call him Steve, asks Will, "So Will, what's your favorite book?" And my husband responds, "Oh, I really like To Kill a Mockingbird." Then Steve gives him a quizzical look and asks him, "Have you read any books outside of high school?" And Will hesitates a bit and says, "Outside of manuals at work, I guess I haven't." So then I try to explain to Steve, "Oh yeah, he's not well educated, so he's never had a reason to be well read." We all had a good laugh, but then Will didn't really contribute a whole lot to the conversation the rest of the night. On the car ride back, Will was pretty quiet. I ask if he's fine, and all he says in a sarcastic tone is, "Peachy." I asked him if I did anything to upset him and he responds back with, "I don't know. I don't think I'm educated enough to properly explain myself." I tell him I didn't tell my friends that he was unintelligent, just that he wasn't college educated. He accused me of minimizing how hard his Navy schooling was, but I explained that military education and college education are simply not the same. We continued to fight until we got home. I texted my sister about what happened and she called me a huge asshole and that I need to apologize, and now I'm having second thoughts about how I handled this. Am I the a-hole for telling my niece she'll have to move out if she's not my nanny anymore? I'm a single mom to 2 kids, 8 and 6. I work as a nurse. 3 days a week, I work 12-hour shifts, 12 p.m. to 12 a.m. After my husband passed, I needed a nanny to tend to my kids from the time they got off school, 3 p.m., onwards. I decided a live-in was the best choice. I have 1 guest bedroom. I live right near a university. Around this time, my niece had just gotten accepted. She wanted to save cost on dorms and offered to watch my kids those 3 days, if she could live there rent-free. I agreed, and said I'd also pay her $22 per hour, a competitive rate for our area. She's done with her classes by 1, so it works out. She fixes them dinner and puts them to bed. Then she's free to do whatever. But of course I pay her from 3 p.m. to 12:30 a.m. It worked for 2 years. My niece never had any complaints. Now, however, my niece is getting an paid internship related to her major that starts in January. She wouldn't be available to watch my kids. I congratulated her and said I could help her look into student housing or an apartment. We'd have 3 months to do this. She was confused. I said since I would need a live-in and only have 1 guest room, she would have to move out. My niece got upset and said this isn't fair, she won't be able to save any money if she gets a dorm or an apartment. She could afford to live on her own, but wouldn't have much savings. I pointed out that this would work best for me as I had to put my kids in aftercare the other 2 days I work. I get off around 5, and the nanny could just pick them up from school versus them having to stay there so long. My niece argued that the nanny could leave at the end of her shift, but after speaking to some nannies, they understandably don't want to drive home so late. Plus, I'm fine with the nanny, and my niece, sleeping after the kids do. So, there's no sense in them sleeping then waking up and driving so drowsy. Even I feel nervous driving home so late, especially after my long shift. My sil, her mom, feels this is unfair to my niece, but she moved in under the condition that she'd work as a nanny. My sil and brother live 3 hours away, so niece couldn't commute if she moved back in with them. They feel I should try to find a nanny who'd be willing to drive home at 12:30 a.m. It'd take me a half-hour minimum to get home, but all nannies I've spoken to have said no or expressed concern about their safety driving so late. Am I the a-hole for audibly saying bruh when my sister announced she was pregnant again? Hello. I'm F16, a younger sister to Lori, 26F. Me and Lori have never been close since we had different dads. I was an affair baby. She's always resented me for ruining her family, but whatever. Lori has 6 kids. Yes. 6. Twin boys Beck and Joe who are 7, planned, a girl Liliana who's 6, unplanned, another girl, Angel who's 5, planned, another boy, Keith who's 2, planned, and another baby boy Carl who's 9 months not planned. Despite the fact that Lori is incapable of taking care of these kids, 4 of them were actually planned. Because she knows my pushover mom will give her money and watch the kids. My mom even quit her job to do so, even turning her workroom into a nursery for Carl. We're pretty well off, but we can't do this forever. I try not to judge, and just ignore Lori like she does me. Even though when my mom is busy doing something like changing a diaper I have to step in and help. Especially with the twins since they're very rough with each other. Tonight at dinner Lori's boyfriend joined, a father to just Carl, as well as Lori's father. This wasn't abnormal, so I didn't think anything of it, until my sister said she had some exciting news. I wished she'd say something else. But I knew what she was going to say. I'm pregnant. She would say. Everyone went dead silent until I said bruh. I didn't mean to say it out loud, but come on. Lori gave me a death stare, and said if I wanted to say something I should just say it. So I did. Lori, this is your, I take a moment to count, 6th child. You know we can't keep supporting you. Without mom you'd be on the streets, and you know that. Look at mom, she's so tired. She's always taking care of your kids and so am I. I bet I've changed more diapers than you have, you selfish bitch. She began to cry, and ran out into her boyfriend's car. He followed her and drove. My mother then began to cry. She left to go out Carl back to bed since he woke up. It was just me and Lori's father. He began to yell and told me I was a brat and Lori was a great mother, then he stormed off. As I'm sitting here in the morning watching the boys, I'm thinking, was I too obnoxious? My mom says that a lot. I don't mean to be because of my autism, but come on. Am I the a-hole got telling my daughter-in-law that she isn't my kid and she isn't invited to a daughter's lunch? I have 2 daughters. When they were younger my wife and I realized that I spent more time with the boys and she spent more time with the girls. So we made father-daughter dates for me and she does son-mom dates. They are all adults now but we still do those dates, but they are just less often. So my 2 daughters and I are going to have tea house. The youngest picked it and just catch up. Now my oldest son got married to Sue. She is a nice girl and I see her at holidays and other events. I got a call from Sue asking about times for tea. I was confused and asked what she was talking about. She explained the daughter-father date and I am her daughter-in-law. I told her this is just a thing between me and my daughters. She repeated that she is my daughter-in-law. This went on for a few times until I told her that she isn't my kid and that she is not invited. She hung up and now I am getting calls from my oldest, my son, her husband, for being a jerk and not welcoming her into the family. Update: I had a conversation with my son, he is the one that mentioned it. I explained what happened and he told me that is what he heard from Sue after she calmed down. He called me a jerk since she was crying and he thought I flipped out on her. I also talked to Sue and she gave an apology, and I apologized for being harsh. She heard about it from my son and thought it would be a nice way to get closer to my daughters. I explained the tradition and she told me she understood from the first call. She panicked since I told her no, so she kept repeating. She told me she was quite embarrassed and asked if she was still invited to the Halloween dinner coming up. She is. She wants a closer relationship with my daughter since she is an only girl on her family. I told her that is a conversation with them and trying to force herself into traditions won't help that. I suggested she invite them out to a winery or something.